indica. We can smoke indica. Call up my link name Indy. We can smoke indica. We can smoke indica. We can smoke indica. Call up my link name Indy.
Just went back to the same word, circumstantial.
Yo, what's going on? What's going on, Grand Rising?
Yo.
How you doing, brother?
I'm good. How you doing?
I can't complain. It's another day. Welcome back, y'all, to Arm Yourself with Knowledge, the show that educates and liberates. I'm your host, John Tell, and that's Chaz. We're going to go ahead and jump in to some stories. We got a bunch of stuff for y'all to talk about. So I saw your comment here, brother. Damn. All right, so we'll get into that in a bit. So I guess we will start off with our major news stories for today. What do we want to get into first? How about this? Try that in a small town. I saw some Facebook posts yesterday and the day before, talking about that country video is pretty racist. So of course I naturally had to look through the comments, and I was like, hold up, well, I didn't want to go looking. I didn't feel like watching this video, and if it's racist, I definitely don't feel like watching it. So I tried to do some more digging. And I came across a meme the other day and yesterday, and I posted it. I just want to show y'all really quick. And that's really all of what I know about this, Chaz. So if you could inform me, I'd appreciate that. But this is the meme that I came across.
Oh no, I definitely can talk about this for the simple fact of I don't think a lot of people fully understand, the history and the significance behind the video that Jason Aldean did, that try that in a small town. Um, for the simple fact of that, one, the original the courthouse behind him is Murray County. And there was something that happened there in 1927. There was a man, Henry Schultz, that was falsely accused of attacking a white woman, and he was kidnapped and hung outside of that courthouse that, where the American flag is hanging in the Jason Aldean video.
So he clearly purposely chose this courthouse.
Right. Well, honestly, I don't really, I want to get a man the benefit of the doubt, but with a simple Google search, you can literally see the history in that area, and especially with the video. I know he says that this is the reason why I got interested in it, is not because of the liberals or the progressives were talking shit about it, or the fact that CMT took it down. It was a simple fact for me that you had conservatives and other, Republicans, black people talking about this, and from different aspects of it. Some are hitting it from a history standpoint, some were hitting it from, we haven't even acknowledged that dark history. And then you have, and we'll get into another story today too, out of Florida. Um, but it just, nobody wants to acknowledge the trauma in the past and act like we're just supposed to forget about it when we're still dealing with the same shit today. It's just coded differently, and still dealing with the same uh, tragedies from
Mhm.
from the past. It's just it's seen as differently. People get off differently. The same way of that Henry Schultz was, kidnapped and hung outside of a courthouse. We see that time and time again today with, I'll put it in fresher terms for people to get it, of people that are sentenced to death but are innocent. So let's say
Right.
Stanley Tookie Williams, or numerous other people that we have lost.
Hmm.
Who's the one kid that the black kid that got the death penalty that they
He had to sit on top of books.
yeah, who was
Yeah.
innocent.
Yep. Yep.
I think back to them stories and how people want us to forget about, black trauma, black history, but yet don't ever want to talk about it and just want to skip past it. And
Yep.
and that's my thing of it is, and honestly, as we're sitting here talking about this, I know we have some interesting stories to get in today. And honestly, as I just said that last little sentence, it made me think about what we were talking about and what we'll get into later about Carly Russell.
Mhm.
Uh, it really just woke me up because that was something I said I didn't want to report on that story. I didn't want to talk about it for a certain reason. But then just given that direct statement that I just gave about black, pain and black trauma, I do think it's something that needs to be discussed for the simple fact of it's a thing that is overlooked when it comes to black and brown people,
Mhm.
you know. And, to go back to Jason Aldean, not only with the courthouse, but that area that he shot that video in, talking about small towns. Another thing that was brought up, and I want to give it to Reverend Tim Christopher. He brought up, sundown towns. Uh,
Right.
and that's where, for me, when I see that video and he's talking about a small town and how they, the clips he uses, a lot of it is BLM from 2020. But why
Really.
not use clips from 1946 or
Right.
1927 of what a small town was for black people? Because you, in that video, he portrays it as, a small town living is just a bunch of white people happy living, but what you don't see in there is the racism. The,
Right. So my thoughts, without seeing the video and knowing much about this dude other than knowing his name, uh, hearing the title, "Try That in a Small Town," and then hearing you say that it has a lot of BLM imagery, says it's racist right there.
well, yeah, I mean, when you go in, you look in the video, he's burning. There's clips of American flags burning, and then he sings his lyrics. Don't try that here. You know what I'm saying? Uh, and that's just the part for me, and I don't think people fully understand.
Right.
Because hold on, let me get the lyrics actually, because there's some things in there that, well, one was said, cuss all that cops, spit in his face, stomp on the flag, light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough? Well, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here, we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take
Mm.
long for you to find out. I recommend you don't try that in a small town. Got a gun that my granddad gave me. They say one day they're gonna round up. Well, that shit might fly in this city. Good luck. Try that in a small town.
Wow.
Right. So basically, he
Wow.
turned this whole song into a political mess that I
To me,
honestly
it's
feel.
racist as fuck, and it's basically inciting white people to take up the arms that they've already been planning to do.
Right.
He's inciting and stoking the race war that they think is here, that they've been wanting. This shit is
Right.
crazy. Like
Honestly,
bro, I literally want to make a response track to this shit.
definitely
Not
can.
even joking.
Here is I some more of the lyrics that I thought were so full of good old boys. raised up right. If you're looking for a fight, try that in a small town. Try that in a small town. Try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road around here. We take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't try that in a small town.
Mm-mm.
The good old boys always up to no good.
No, like this scares me, bro. Like hearing this song, it
I live in a small town. It don't scare me. It's you know I'm gonna be 100% honest, right? Because we talk about racism. We talk about these groups like KKK, Three Percenters, um, and so many other facets uh, facets of groups, but we never talk about the police, who are one of the biggest race soldiers in America, and that's one thing that we never want to discuss the full history of policing in America and how they started as slave catchers
right,
and how it's
right,
progressed into the same thing. We could talk about chain gangs, STS crews. They ain't no difference than what they were doing back in 1800s and early 1900s to black people for free labor, for
right.
slavery, even before 1965 with the Civil Rights Act, or even let's go with the 13th Amendment, because the 14th Amendment just made chain gangs and mass incarceration legal, in another word, and turned it from slavery to prison.
Mm-hmm.
So all that's all we did. I mean, people don't look up the story of Angola, and I did do one of the first things that I stories I did with Leon Block is actually about Angola, and the history there goes all the way back. That was a plantation, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I just don't think people really get the gist of, when we talk about generational, uh, that to me, that goes generational, because when you see things like that, when I seen the Jason Aldean video, and I watched it, sadly, I did, I watched it because I felt like to talk about something, you have to understand what you're talking about, what you watched. And when I watched that video, there was a lot of views, and it just made and a lot of comments as well on the YouTube video, and it made me realize, uh, damn, is this how people really think? Because
Yeah,
you can go just on not only just that, because it did bring up the whole conversation about sundown towns again. So, and I don't think people get the gist of it, and that's something that I did want to dig deeper into, because there is a book about history of sundown towns that James, rest in heaven, rest in peace, James. He was a professor, uh, Professor Lowendahl, and he did basically a whole study on sundown towns and the history of it, why they're called sundown towns, and all of that. So it's for me, Napa, you know,
right.
where we go get our car parts. Uh, you know, I live in a city in a county that has three primarily sundown towns: in Red Wing, where I reside right now, Pine Island, and Cannon Falls. And see, Pine Island and Red Wing, there's history of lynchings, of hangings. There's history of, and I know I'm getting off subject, but it's kind of it goes. And I just want to get people to get an understanding of when I seen that video, what it brought back to me, and so that you can get an understanding, because I know that's not something you're gonna watch,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because it's to some black people it could be traumatic, and but for me, that's what it brought me back to, is the history that nobody ever wants to talk about. You know what I'm saying? They like to glorize it. Maybe that's a good word. They like to promote it, but they don't ever want to have an in-depth conversation and talk about exactly what happened and why it happened. And because honestly, it should have never happened, because a lot of these instances from 1919, 1927, 1946, 1921 have all been falsely accused black men, and
Mm-hmm.
white men have been, because of our system, we're allowed to do that type of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one thing that I wanted to get into what I don't know, we were running a little bit over time uh, about this story, but I just wanted to get it into a deeper context when we're talking
Yeah.
about small towns and sundown towns and what Napa, because, and I'm going to leave it at this point. This is one thing that I learned from James Lowen is Napa in a lot of towns. If you go back in the history, there wasn't even a Napa store, but there were Napa signs.
Right.
Now, when you look at Napa, you'd be like, damn, what does that mean? No African people allowed. So uh, you just got to go back and look at the wording that they used to call us, because we went from Negroes to coloreds to colories to darkies to, light brights. So the language and the coding has changed when it comes to talking about black people, just like how they're trying to get rid of calling us blacks right now and calling us BIPOC or calling us POC. So that's just one little education that I wanted to bring up uh, about Jason Aldean and try that in a small town, because I try that shit all the time in a small town and I'm still living here today. So fuck Jason Aldean and fuck that. Try that shit in a small town, because I definitely would try it.
That part. Like my
I'll
thing
just keep
is
it a buck.
there's like tons and tons of uh black people in inner cities that don't know anything about this song
Right.
and would just be passing through somewhere, going to another place, and come across people that take that song
Dead
like a
ass
fucking
serious.
vibe. Right.
Like a good old boy.
Exactly. And he, like I said, he's literally stoking flames here of this race war that these people talk about. The same kind of people that presumably listen to his music, are the same people that say that there's a race war and they've got guns. And what he's talking about having guns in the song, and like it's terrifying for our country. It's sad times that we live in, scary times that we live in. And talking about this, I think that it's important because people need to be aware of it. As many people as possible need to be aware of the fact that there are lots and lots of people that
Right.
feel this way, that live out there, and they don't have to live in the sticks. They can be your next door neighbor and you don't even know it. Not to mention, with the cost of living rising and criminalization and all kinds of other things in not only inner cities and major cities, but smaller cities and small towns as well. So black and brown people, people of color, as you say, are moving further into the exurbs and rural areas. And that creates more clashes than you could imagine. And then you've got stuff like this coming out.
Right.
Think about how many black and brown people and his Latinx and Asians have moved into smaller country areas and have more money than the people that are from there.
Right.
Think
No,
about it,
exactly.
or don't, regardless. But they're still facing of all the stories of racism and horrible accounts against people of color that I've been hearing about in the past 3 years because of black people and brown people having to move into these areas due to the cost of living in inner cities is staggering, especially when it comes to our youth.
Right.
So that's what I think of when I hear about this song. So that's just crazy. So Matt said, quote, from 1882 to 1969, according to records maintained by the NAACP, 4,743 people were lynched, in indelible stain on our history. The vast majority of victims were black. Most of the lynchings occurred in the South. And so, you know what? I was watching this YouTube video and I can't remember who it came from, but it was on YouTube. And I have the link somewhere in our chats. But did you know Italians were lynched in the South? Yeah. So obviously, like when they first were immigrating over here, they were considered to be, they would always mark them as Southern Italy or Southern Italian to distinguish them from like white skin Italian. Because if you're from Southern Italy or Sicily, you've got very like, you look mixed or you look Arab. or you have very African-like features. And so they villainized black people just like they villainized Southern Italians just like they did Irish people and just like they did black people. And so they were cast. That's why you hear of a lot of Italians having to live in the black communities. It wasn't until there was an incident that happened, I believe it was in Texas, that sealed the deal for Columbus Day, which gave Italians assimilation into whiteness. All Italians assimilation into whiteness, regardless of if you're from Southern Italy or not. But back in those times, Italians were getting lynched just like black people, which like just blew my mind. Sucker punch
But
somebody.
weren't the Irish too though? Like,
Yeah,
because isn't that
yeah,
where the movie
yeah.
Gang of New York
So
came
that's
from
also
too?
how they created the hierarchy to get everyone to cast blacks to the bottom, was to give whites eventually, because everyone was on the same playing field at first, right? But then they gave Irish people indentured servitude, and then they gave them things. You know what I mean? To give them, they still kept them below them, but they gave them one up so that they could look down on black people. So it started to create what is known as a caste system or a hierarchy.
Right. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to continue this conversation too, because I want to get into um, our other stories as well. Because
Yeah.
talking about Florida and I think it was Carly.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Vacation earlier this week. Now, this follows Governor DeSantis' so-called Stop Woke Act, which forced the rewriting of education standards there in Florida. A controversial part of these new standards is instruction for middle school students to learn, quote, how slaves develop skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. The largest teachers union in the state has spoken out against the new standards, calling them, quote, a step backward, adding that students deserve the full truth of American history. For more on this, we are joined by Andrew Atterbury. He is an education policy reporter for Politico based in Florida. Andrew, implying that enslaved people benefited from their bondage has understandably upset many people. How are folks in Florida responding to this?
Sure. Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here from Tallahassee. So that they came out on Wednesday at this meeting, and this is really the first time that people got a glimpse of what these standards look like. And it was a firestorm for the Florida Department of Education, the Board of Education. People that were there weren't too thrilled with these lessons, but the state, they were proud to roll these out. This is something they've been working on for a while. Like you said, they come from the Stop Woke Act. That was something that specifically Governor Ron DeSantis requested last year. The woke part is actually an acronym. It means the Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act. That was something that was one of his biggest parts of his agenda back last year. And that what the law actually does, it creates new protections for students and even workers is a whole other part of it. That a person shouldn't be instructed to feel guilt, anguish, or any form of psychological distress due to their race, color, sex, or national origin. So because of that new law, they decided that they needed to change all of these the standards too. So they actually created a whole new carve out on Black history, which is why they were so proud of it. It was something that they thought went even deeper than their previous lessons. But whenever these were rolled out and you saw some of the framing of it, some people really took issue with it.
Andrew, I should say that we reached out to the governor's office and they pointed us to a statement that was shared by the Board of Education. It reads in part, quote, Florida students deserve to learn how slaves took advantage of whatever circumstances they were in to benefit themselves and the community of African descendants. How does this differ from what has been taught in the state in the past?
Well, when you look at the lessons, they really didn't have any specific carve-outs for Black history. So this is all, for a lot of the stuff is new things that they're introducing, which is why the state thinks this is good for them. We're going, hey, we're actually going deeper in some of this stuff. But when you look at, like you said, the way that some of these were worded, like the benefits of it, people said that was just absolutely not okay. I mean, you saw this getting issue. Like people were raising, like civil rights lawyer Benjamin Crump was talking about this. So this was getting a lot more attention than just Florida, which is probably not something that people expected, just from the way that it was rolled out. And as you and the statement that you mentioned earlier, the state is also taking aim at the teachers union, saying that a lot of this is their fault and that they're blowing up an issue that the administration, the Department of Education, they're constantly at odds with the teachers union. This is things that go back to the COVID pandemic, teacher pay. I mean, that's pretty typical for Florida, but there were other organizations as well. There were state lawmakers, there were Democratic lawmakers who raised issues with this. The NAACP was there. I mean, so there were several other groups too. So it's not just teachers unions, but that's kind of what the state is doing a little bit, is needling the union, saying y'all kind of sparked a lot of these concerns.
Well, I'm sure that there's also parents who are concerned about this, and I'm wondering where we go from here. The Board of Education, made up entirely of DeSantis appointees. So what recourse do parents have if they disagree?
Well, now this really falls on the school districts to carry this out, and then we'll go through picking textbooks and things like that. But as far as the state goes, I mean, these are the standards now. These were unanimously passed by the Board of Education, and the Board of Education stood by these too. You know, they said the whole history is there. They said they stood by these, and that they kind of downplayed the complaints as saying, you know, that we think this is great, and people are just missing the point, basically. So from the state's perspective, this is pretty much done, which is why you see them defending it today, and they doubled down on it again today, saying that this is what we're going to go with. And you still, even speaking to some of the concerns, I mean, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke out about it. She's supposed to speak in Jacksonville today. So this is getting a lot more attention than I think folks really expected it to.
All right, Andrew Atterbury, thank you.
Thanks for having me. There's one.
Wow.
Right.
I don't even. I don't have words right now. Help me out here.
Shit. Critical race theory. What else you want to call it? You know what I'm saying? Like, be 100% honest. We're going to take out part of history that they want us to forget about. They want to erase.
Shit is crazy.
It is, you know, and I just put something in there that Florida school guidelines can punish trans students and teach how slavery developed skills for black people.
Right.
Damn, that's crazy as hell. So what is different than prison? Because that teaches us skills too.
This shit's fucking nuts. The world that, like, the country we're living in.
Do you really expect any different? Let's be 100.
This is crazy. Just the world we're living in. Like, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, like.
You hear me?
Yeah.
I'm not echoing.
I had to switch my audio. No, like I feel for people, because for black students that are poor and brown students that are poor that cannot afford to be homeschooled, I don't know how that works, but like,
do you really feel bad though? Because I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm gonna say it like this, man, because you know, I know it's something that isn't talked about, but California gave a travel advisory.
Yeah.
To blacks for 26 other states that have legislation that is harmful to blacks and that is harmful to trans.
And I believe New York and California also have a law where if you're fleeing, if you need to flee from, especially Florida and Texas, you're welcome to come to these two states, and they give you some kind of incentive and like way to set your life back up if you need. Which I want to point out, for if you are trans or queer or a person of color in general, and you are facing really dire consequences as a result of all these laws being passed, you definitely should flee to one of these states. It's kind of like claiming asylum, and you go to another state and they will help you set your life back up, literally. And it's crazy we have to even, like, it's crazy. Can a country boot? Like, why can America just, like, Washington, D.C., kick Florida out of the United States? Texas too.
But okay, so let me, you know,
literally, if they were their own countries, they would rival the U.S. as far as GDP. Yeah, they have the capacity to be their own countries, both states, California too. I think California's GDP would be right after the US or something like that. Some shit if it was its own
Right.
country.
So Rep Byron Donalds, because I know earlier this year they put out a travel advisory to Florida, the NAACP did, about people traveling to Florida, and it just makes me like, to be black in America. I'm gonna be 100. No state is safe.
Yep.
California, Georgia, have New York, have some of the highest rates of police-involved killings of
Yep.
black and brown people.
Yep.
So why would we want to? And to be honest, we look at those two states that I just said; those are both Democratic states.
Yep.
Why? Oh wait, no, Georgia actually isn't. Kemp is a Republican.
Literally, in my opinion, though, the best states to live in for a black person: Georgia, Maryland, Virginia, Delaware. That's my opinion.
There's
like overall, like quality of life, laws that help black people, enclaves of black communities that like are sheltered from this kind of stuff, great
Right.
schooling and opportunities, not like low levels of police brutality cases, stuff like that. Like overall, Georgia is really good because it's heavily black, and the rural areas that are heavily black, you don't have
damn.
issues like you do in
But
Atlanta.
but let's
Atlanta metro is where all the brutality.
But we
cases.
talk about Georgia, and I remember just talking to about Kelvin and about her son Eric Holmes,
Right.
and then even about her book Changing the Narrative,
Right.
and we talk about 112 police-involved killings last year of black and brown men.
Again,
women.
that was but they're all largely in the Atlanta metro area. It's just Atlanta where that's happening. You look at the rest of the state, it's largely black, rural, and none of that happens. Peaceful, happy, quality of people with quality of life in the rest of the state. And you can ask anybody. And I know people that started in Atlanta but ended up moving to other places because of all the stuff going on, and they have the best, like they're just happy with their life. They're involved in like the politics, as far as the control that black people have everywhere else, is pretty decent. Now we talk about the state overall, the legislator, that's different. Like the governor and shit like that, that's a different story. So not to say that black Georgians aren't under attack, still they are, but when it comes to their local areas, yeah, they have a good quality of life. Same thing with Virginia. It depends on where.
I thought you was about to say Mississippi. I was about to say you a damn lie.
No, not Mississippi. I said Virginia. Maryland
Yeah.
overall and Delaware overall depends on where too. Like the bigger cities like Baltimore or Wilmington, no, you're still facing those cases and it's the poverty levels and shit like that. But when you go to smaller towns and rural areas, they're predominantly black, quiet, great quality of life, so on and so forth. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about states overall and looking at all those things. Those are the 4 states that I would suggest.
Right.
But California, New York, crazy. So what do we have next, sir? Go ahead and take a break quick.
Yeah.
And we can get into some random knowings. How about that?
Yes, we can.
All right, sounds good to me.
Fight. Rise against the system. All are to win. Rise against the system. Rise and fight. Rise against the system. Rise and fight. Rise against the system. Rise and I will fight. I will rise against the system. I will rise. know you're alive. That's enough for me.
Finding a friend, like, on a hike is something similar.
I will rise against the system and fight. I will fight for my rights.
I will fight.
I am learning and growing based off those before me that
fight.
this system cannot sustain.
Rise against the
Oh, indica. We can smoke indica. Call up my link name Indy. We can smoke indica. We can smoke indica. We can smoke indica. Call up my link name Indy.
Went back to some word. Circumstance was I am circumstance. And one day will be. Reflect. All that I be. Reflect. It's perfect.
Yo, and we are back. We so yeah, we are back with some random knowings segment where we talk about random facts and history and continue to arm you all with knowledge. So yes, today we are talking about Frank Embry. On the morning of July 22nd, 1899, a white mob abducted Frank Embry from officers transporting him to stand trial and lynched him in front of a crowd of over 1,000 onlookers in Fayette, Missouri. About 1 month earlier, Frank Embry had been arrested and accused of assaulting a white girl. Though his trial was scheduled for July 22nd, the town's residents grew impatient and, rather than allow Mr. Embry to stand trial, took matters into their own hands by lynching Mr. Embry. Wow. Link to this article is in the comments for everybody to check out. Wow.
Yeah, definitely something that they definitely don't want to speak about.
It just another quick fact. A quick fact for y'all. 3 presidents, all founding fathers, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Monroe, died on July 4th. Presidents Adams and Jefferson also died the same year, 1826. President Monroe died in 1831. Coincidence? You decide. And the Barbie doll's full name is Barbara Millicent Roberts from Willows, Wisconsin. Her birthday is March 9th, 1959, when she was first displayed at the New York Toy Fair. Interesting.
Here's a big ass one that I bet you a lot of people didn't know, that the Emancipation Proclamation is read to the cabinet today, July 26, 1861, by Abraham Lincoln. Damn, I didn't even know that.
You said 1851?
That's crazy. 1861.
1861, right.
Yeah, that's crazy. I never knew that. Today in history.
Also today in history, in 1969, today, Aretha Franklin was arrested for disturbing the peace in Detroit, Michigan. That's
crazy. Today in I, mm, mm, mm. Crazy. Black facts. Black facts. Crazy,
Uh,
crazy.
so I also want to. We can go ahead and break into the next section, which would be the knowledge bar. Uh, I want to bring up Lucy Parsons. You can check out her Wikipedia or Google her. She was an American socialist anarchist and later an anarcho communist. Her early life is kind of shrouded in mystery. She doesn't like to talk about it, but I feel it's also because she doesn't like to claim her African ancestry. She said that she was of mixed Mexican Native American ancestry, but historians believe she was born to a Negro slave, possibly in Virginia, and then married a black freedman in Texas originally. In addition to Parsons, she went by other surnames during her life, including Carter, Diaz, Gonzalez, and Hall. She met Albert Parsons in Waco, Texas, and claimed to have married him, although records have not been found. And they moved to Chicago together around 1873. And Parsons' politics were formed by the harsh repression of the Chicago Railroad strike in 1877. So she argued for labor organization and class struggle. She started writing texts and speaking publicly at events. So she joined the International Working Men's Association and later the Knights of Labor, as well as setting up the Chicago Working Women's Union with her friend Lizzie Swank alongside other women. So that's how she got her start in Chicago politics. And the Chicago Railroad strike of 1877 definitely set the tone for what happened in 1877. The Haymarket Affair, if anyone is familiar with that, look it up and do your history. We might talk about it at some point. I've done episodes on it before. So Albert Parsons was executed in 1877 following the Haymarket Affair. And I think that's what pretty much sparked her to become an even more of an activist and speak out for not only women's rights, but labor rights, workers' rights in general. And as her life went on, she moved towards communism. She became a notorious political figure, and Chicago police attempted for decades to stop her from speaking publicly. And Emma Goldman was another woman like Parsons. They were counterparts, but they criticized each other heavily. But they had endearment for each other, like they loved each other, but they didn't express that outwardly, if you get what I'm saying. Like they challenged each other, but they challenged each other so that they could challenge the world to think better in terms of having rights for us all, better rights for us all. They didn't hate each other. They just picked at each other at the way they went about doing their own activism, put it that way. So they clashed over differing attitudes to free love, but they continued activism along the way anyway. And when I think Lucy Parsons died first, Emma Goldman did say really nice things about her after that, because she kind of like lost her, kind of like Prince and Michael Jackson, you know. And when Michael Jackson died, then Prince started saying nice things about him and how like he missed his brother, and that's what kept him so sharp, was that they had a rivalry, and they challenged each other, you know. And that was kind of like Lucy Parsons and Emma Goldman. And I really urge people to look up Lucy Parsons and Emma Goldman, because they were very powerful women and activists and radicals that really changed the shape of America and directly impacted how we spend our lives today. Most people spend their lives working, but we would not have the working conditions that we have today. They may not be the best, and we still have improvements to make compared to what things were before they started standing up and speaking on the behalf of rights for all people.
Right.
So I'm going to put the information for Lucy Parsons Wikipedia in the comments, but definitely check out some information on Lucy Parsons when you all get a chance. Emma Goldman as well. These were very, very, very powerful women. And this is Lucy Parsons in her heyday right here. And if you look at her, you could see that she's got some black ancestry, but she maybe has some native ancestry as well. But she definitely tried to downplay her African ancestry as much as possible.
Right.
And I feel that was so that she could be heard more and people would actually listen to her and take her seriously versus being a complete Negro. You know, I think she understood the times and did her best to work with them, as opposed to it being more about being shamed of being, ancestrally black.
Right. Right.
Just crazy, but that was the times. I love history. All right, so that was your knowledge bar, your piece of history. I want to go ahead and jump into national news because we've got a story out of Israel. Who knew that black people in the 1960s fled to Israel? I didn't know that. Did you?
Nope.
All right. Well, we going to find out more about this. Check it out.
We're not black Jews. We're not Jewish. We're not adherents to Judaism, the tenets of Judaism. We're practitioners of spirituality versus religion. They can make all kind of exceptions and creative immigration rules that allow for Ukrainians and all others to come in. But when it comes to those of African ancestry, we seem to be the target of very, very crafty wording and loopholes that define us on the outside.
Who do they think is going anywhere without their babies? Like, I had a breastfeeding baby. When I received the letter, my child was 5 months old. And it was like, oh yeah, so you gotta go. So what's supposed to happen with my babies? Like, I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a baby at the time. What's supposed to happen with my children?
They would study outside, sitting on rocks, in the cold, in the heat, and it forced us to establish our own institution. The establishment of the State of Israel was based on the fact that Israel is the ancestral home of the Jewish people, right? Or the people of the Bible, or the people of the book. We identify as being part of that people as well. And so we came back home by divine calling like a lot of other people did. What is the reason why? We are the only people who have not been accepted after 50 plus years in Israel. That's something that nobody can be able to explain. Why?
Yeah. So, what's your thoughts on that, brother?
You know, I was just, I don't have it right here with me, but I was just trying to look for it, and I will find it. But it's crazy that we brought that up this morning because I was just the other day looking over uh, Semitic shit, and it was like, yeah, I gotta go find it because I don't want to take it out of context. But basically, of saying that how can we be uh, anti-Semitic when we black people are Semitic. And I don't know if that's what was really being um, talked about on the video, but I know it was something that I think it was either Ice Cube, Will Smith, maybe it was maybe it was Nick Cannon. I don't know. But
I
one of
think it
them
was Nick Cannon.
brought up a very good point about Semitic and the words and of how words have changed over time. And, you know, just various different things. And, you know, because I really looked after watching that Nick Cannon, and I think he did it with ADL, the Jewish dude. He did a podcast or whatever I watched. But, you know, that they want to call us anti-Semitic, you know, when we talk about certain things when it comes to Jewish people, when it's actually, you know, it might not be factual. A lot of it is factual, and some of it is conspiracy. But to me, it all intertwines in what's going on today. And instead of looking at it as being hateful, I think we should really understand what's being said and do our research, and that we can learn from it, so that we can stop calling people hateful when it's not really being hateful. It's the truth.
Right.
That's all I got on that one. I know I might have been off a little bit with it, but
no,
that's I know one thing that you keep me researching and studying on certain things, especially when it has to do with history. So I definitely do appreciate that, because you can't go forward if we don't know our past.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So at least if you don't understand the past, you can't move forward. So I think for me, that is one, and that's why I love being on the Leon Block Network, is for the simple fact of that we educate and we liberate. So that's a big one for me. So yeah, because I mean it is, and honestly, I'm kind of tongue twisted a little bit, for the simple fact, if I knew we were going to talk about Jewish and all that, I would have looked for that piece, because I think I got a bookmark on Twitter actually, because I've been bookmarking more shit recently.
Gotcha. We can put it on our social media news section when you find it.
Right. No, and that's definitely
right,
something that I want to talk about too, because even when we talk about, you know, Carlee Russell, you know, and I know that's something that I don't think we really got into today.
Yeah, because that's the next section. We can go ahead and jump into it. Social media news. Thank you for that nice segue, actually, because I was about to do one and you just did it for me. So because we found a lot of information via YouTube explaining the Carlee Russell situation. So for those not aware of who Carlee Russell is, there was a woman that went missing last week, and she said that she saw a baby on the side of the road. She got out of the car to go see what was wrong with the baby, and she was on the phone apparently, and the phone went dead and no one saw where it found her, and then she appeared at home. So yeah, the way that things transpired, at first the police wasn't saying anything from my understanding, and now they've come out and said things after the family had went on national TV to speak out about it. Yeah, so let me go ahead and change my audio because this shit's fucked up, and I gotta figure out how to get this working right. But let me show you all this video. 1 second.
So the update I never wanted to truly have to report on. So we've all been talking about the Carlee Russell case. This is her Instagram, Carlee. over the last few days. You know, she shocked the nation, and black women all over the country felt empowered. We felt finally pleased that America was caring about black women. Every national news outlet was reporting about Carlee Russell. This is the first time this has ever happened. The hunt was on to find this black girl. But then when she showed up at her house, it got a little greasy. Why did it get a little greasy? Because she just showed up. So then that's when the world got divided. Wait, what's going on? Something is not right here. Okay, we don't want to speak. We want our privacy. Something is going on. What is going on? Well, when you start talking about something, people start DMing you the truth. It looks like 50 people from Hoover have already got fired for leaking what's really going on with this case, and it's trickled into my DM. So you mean to tell me all this was because she was trying to get back at her ex-man? Yeah, that boyfriend that spoke out about her being kidnapped and held and tortured, yeah, that was her ex-man, and he actually cheated on her with a stripper, and Carlee had it out with the stripper, and to get back at him, yeah, she disappeared herself, and then got afraid when it blew up. This is what Carlee said to the side chick. Itch, please. He told me everything you said about me, and you thought I told him to say that. I wasn't even with him. You're delusional AF if you think your little conversation was anything more than convenience and the fact that he used you to get back at me out of anger. You want to talk about I don't compare to you on your worst day? Girl, bye. You're miserable, or at least should be, being a stripper to provide for a child I've heard you've had from multiple people. So not surprised you don't know who your baby daddy is. Mention me or contact my NIGGA again, and you'll see I'm not the one to play with. You don't want you and your whole family touched. You're poor. I'm rich. You're a stripper. I'm a nurse. You're ugly. I'm beautiful. You could never. You're the bottom of the barrel. Someone from the police department just could not watch us all suffer. So they released these details. Here's the update. She's sticking to the story that she was abducted. She says she was lured into the woods by some people who live in the woods, described as a person with orange hair, balding on top, tied her up and drove her around and put her in an 18-wheeler and fed her cheeses for 2 days, and they painted her nails. They kept her on 150 somewhere, and somehow she managed to get away and run through the woods to her neighborhood until she got into her house and then goes into the hospital. Hoover got some Ring doorbell footage from her neighborhood, and it just shows her walking casually until she gets close to her house, and then she starts sprinting and flailing arms and acting a fool. She got caught stealing from work that day, failed out of nursing school, and has been on drugs. She had her friend behind her, and that's who picked her up. She was with her friend all weekend. The police knew she was safe because she unblocked her ex while she was quote-unquote abducted. She planned to disappear and realized it wasn't going to work. What up, Nurse Gang? What up, TikTok? So, the update,
We tried to hug her as best we could, but I had to stand back because she was not in a good state. So we had to stand back and let medical professionals work with her. But Carlee has given detectives her statement so that they can continue to pursue her abductor.
Do you believe that there's an abductor still out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you believe she was fighting for her life?
Oh, she definitely fought for her life. There were moments when she physically had to fight for her life, and there were moments when she had to mentally fight for her life.
Let me say up front, this investigation is not over. We enlisted the help of the United States Secret Service in conducting this analysis. Part of what data includes several internet searches, and the days leading up to her disappearance, I think, are very relevant to this case. The term, you have to pay for an Amber Alert was searched. The day of her disappearance, the term, how to take money from a register without being caught was searched. A search for the movie Taken, a film about abduction, was conducted. As we've been unable to verify most of Carlee's initial statement made to investigators, and we have no reason to believe that there is a threat to the public safety related to this particular case.
We tried to hug her as best we could, but I had to stand back because she was not in a good state.
Oh Lord is right.
I'm gonna put it like this, and I'm gonna just say it. Stop using Google to commit fake crimes or imaginary scripted movie scenes, man. Like dead ass, because we have way too many people, black and brown women,
could search everything.
right, that are missing, man, and like you're taking valuable resources, time, media stories because now, lady, and it's crazy because she got a whole nickname. They call her Carly Jussie Smollett Russell, and it's
Oh
like,
shit.
right, people forget about Jussie, and that's the whole part that bugs me because we take these serious crimes that actually do happen, hate crimes and kidnappings and trafficking and things like that. Uh, that there are real stories out there. Not saying that the shit didn't happen to Jussie, uh, or whatever, but Carly ass story is fucking fake as hell,
Right.
and uh, it's a shame that we as people have to do certain things to get shit. I don't know what she was looking for. 15 minutes of stupidity, uh, 15 minutes of fame, whatever the broad was looking for. She definitely got it and more. And
Right.
I hope that she uh, takes this as a learning lesson
Right.
and to see it. You can't pull bullshit like this because for people that are seriously going through this, it puts a shadow and it throws salt.
How we
And
supposed to get help now?
right. When you got
How they
people
supposed
pulling
to
bullshit
believe they
like
going?
this,
Because if one black person doing bad makes us all look bad in their eyes,
hmm
especially in mainstream media's eyes. So
right,
what's the chances they going to highlight a missing black person the next time? Those are my
right,
thoughts, and I'm sure it's a lot of other people's thoughts too.
right. That's
Shit
all
is
I got on that one.
right.
'Cause, I mean, I could go in further, but I definitely want to leave that for the next episode of Army of Self and Knowledge because I also want to talk about on the next episode, and we're gonna leave off on this is that I want to talk about what happened in Fargo, North Dakota. I
Mhm.
definitely want to talk about the man who ambushed police, um, and what he was preparing for, and why Fargo and the feds and the DOJ and Homeland Security don't really want to come out with too much information about the shooter and all of that. So I definitely want to get into that story uh, on the next episode of Army of Self and Knowledge. So we will be talking about Muhammad Barkat. Um, so because there's not enough out there that I feel, and that's something that I want to get into. And I know you probably haven't heard much about that story. Maybe you have, Jontel.
Nope.
Uh, so we will be. I don't know if it'll be either. I don't know. Tomorrow, today, we will be doing. Because I want to do a special on this. I want to do a special on it on the gun violence because over the last couple of days we've had two major incidents. I feel that definitely need to be talked about, and I think are going to be talked about for the simple fact of
Really?
yes, one was actually happened in your area in Philadelphia, and then the other happened around my area in Fargo, North Dakota.
Where
Uh,
at in Philly?
Philip, and it was the crazy. It was a rapper's son, Gilly the Kid. His son, Young Mac and Cheese, was murdered the other night, Thursday night, and three people were shot, and I think it was on South Street. I think this
Oh
was
wow. Okay.
yeah. So he was outside in his car,
What
and
is it with
three people.
active shooters going to South Street to do it? Like,
I don't know, man, but
let me get my
it
cheesesteak and leave me the fuck alone.
right. So that's
South
something that
Street,
I
for those who don't know, South Street is like Bourbon Street. What
right.
what Bourbon Street is to New Orleans, South Street is to Philly.
Philly, right? So that's something that I definitely want to get into, and not just because it's a celebrity's child. I want to get into it because of the simple fact that that shit shows that it happens. Doesn't matter your money. Bullets don't have names. They
Yep.
don't see your wealth class. They don't see your race. They don't see your age. Uh, they don't see your profession either. So I definitely want to get into those stories, and I think the next special we're probably going to do with Arm Yourself with Knowledge is a gun special. We did talk to Jamal Johnson recently, and I think with the way that gun violence is going on and it's not being spotlighted enough in our community, uh, let's talk about the issues and the factors that really go into gun violence. Is it just rap music? Is it the the ghetto life that poor living that we endure every day, or is it just something that it's product of our environment? Um, so I definitely want to get in depth and talk about it because gun violence hits on different aspects from police situations to community situations, and then even just mass casualty situations. Um, so I really, really want to break it down and break it down into a sense where people can understand because everywhere that we look, when we turn on our TVs, we turn on YouTube, we pick up social media apps, we pick up a newspaper, and what do we see? Trauma. We see pain. We see violence. Uh, so I wanted to understand and talk about the indoctrination and the desensitizing that America does uh, about gun violence and traumas that happen in America. And that is what I'm going to leave off with today. So, I'll look. So the ever conservative, I have no problem with them expressing support for police officers. From what I can tell, lack of support for them has led to daily shootouts, especially in North Minneapolis, with young children and bystanders caught in crossfire. Obviously, he is speaking in reaction to such events. Some may want street justice to rule their neighborhood. Others would rather not. As it is said, the only way for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. His comment doesn't go all the way, but Kevin, really do appreciate it, man. And I know I'm in Red Wing right now, North Minneapolis and Brooklyn Center, and all that is a shit show, Tard Fest, fuck Tard Fest. But just know I'm coming back, man, and that it'll be soon. I haven't forgot about Minneapolis. I haven't forgot about the Twin Cities at all. So just know that shit. I was just down there yesterday, checking on the building over Broadway, so and handling some business errands. So I haven't forgot about the Twin Cities. You guys are still in my thoughts every day, my prayers. So definitely it's not an area I will ever forget about because I'm down there all the time and I am looking for housing. So I just wanted to go off of that. I'm sorry I just ranted off for the last 4 minutes.
Oh, you're good, man.
But
Okay.
I just wanted to leave at that. I'm gonna leave out my saying: "Win or fail, freedom or jail, heaven or hell. Wish me well."
Oh, Indica. We can smoke Indica. Call up my link name Indy. We can smoke Indica. We can smoke Indica. We can smoke Indica. Call up my link name Indy. We can smoke Indica.
Guide yourself to the troops through the next galaxy in 7 seas and burn, ice, cold, no greed, medicate, breathe, IV. Medicate, congratulate the freedom state and conquer your community and dilate the camaraderie, heighten the mentality, configure your karma, smoke screen, the never-ending need, purify your seed, cause heaven is here and human soul is in need.
Know you're alive. That's enough for me.